Okay, Invest Well for Starters, Module 1, and we will get started. Video 1, and we will get started. So here's what you're going to learn in this training video. As we talked, you're going to learn risk tolerance, knowing your appetite. And this is really important because if you don't understand your risk tolerance, then when your investments either underperform or they just plateau, or if they overperform, it's important to understand why, and it's important to understand your position before you can start investing. So remember, with all securities, there is an opportunity for them to lose or go down in value. And so that's the disclosure that any uh, um, certified financial planner will share with you, or any investment consultant will share with you. They will let you know that your investments may lose value, and that could be a loss of value as low as or as high as 100%. So you could literally put in 1,000 and lose 1,000. So it's very important to understand your risk tolerance, because this is also going to be the gauge to determine how much you start off with and how much you invest with consistently on a month-to-month basis. So it's important to know your appetite. We're also going to discuss the investment suitability. Now, this is very important because you need to understand exactly what is suitable for you at this point, this season in your life. And you'll see in the Knowledge is Power worksheet how to just some basic parameters on how to determine your current season of life. And by the way, when we say season of life, we're talking about your season as an investor, where you are in your life and how that impacts you as an investor. Then you're also going to know how to pick an industry and own it. Now, this is important because when I began investing, I chose a particular industry and I focused solely on that industry. And that was able to that allowed me to be able to streamline, not get confused, not feel overwhelmed by trying to see what McDonald's was doing or Coca-Cola was doing, and then turn around and see what ExxonMobil was doing, and then turn around and jump to the tech space and figure out what Apple was doing, and then turn around and jump to the automotive space and figure out what Ford or GM was doing. See, when you start jumping around across too many different industries, it can become very daunting and very overwhelming. So this is why we're going to get you to pick an industry, possibly two, but definitely you want to own it, meaning this is the information that you're consuming. You're going to be learning about the companies, the industry, what's going on in the world, how that industry is impacted by world news. And that's going to help you to focus and hone in on your investments. So here we go. So risk tolerance, this is simply defined as the degree of movement in the market that you can withstand without being primarily influenced by emotions. Now, if you remember from the initial webinar, we discussed how being too emotional is not a good thing. So I just want to remind you that if you're too emotional when it comes to investing, then you're not going to be able to make rational thinking, clear-headed decisions. And so this is important when it comes to risk tolerance. So as an example, if you are conservative, and I'll explain what that means in a few slides, but for now, if you were conservative, meaning you really don't want to put your initial principal or investments at risk, then that means you put them in something very conservative. It's not going to earn a whole lot in an annual yield. It may offer you, 1.5%, maybe 2% at best, right? That's very, very conservative. Not a lot of chance for you to lose any of your principal. Well, when you invest that way, if you're conservative, and let's say you tried to jump into something aggressive and then it goes down in value, you're going to be freaking out. And then you're going to say, that's it. I knew I shouldn't have bought that company. I'm going to sell. See, this is why it's very, very important to know your risk tolerance, because this is going to help you to keep your emotions in check. So there's three types of risk tolerance. There's aggressive, conservative, and moderate. I'm going to explain to you what aggressive is. That's while maintaining a base of riskless securities. Aggressive investors reach maximum returns with maximum risk. So they're going to have some investments that are not at risk. but most of what they invest in, meaning when you look at their, if you look at their total investments as a pie, you would see probably like 85% of their total investments are in things that are extremely risky. But that also means that they stand to get a high return. So maximum risk, maximum return. Here's a tip for you. Aggressive investors tend to be savvy investors with strong liquidity and cash flow. Cash flow means liquidity. Liquidity means cash flow. And they're going to have significant earning time to rebound. So typically, your really aggressive investors either are young, right? They're in their, early 20s. They've got a whole another 40 plus years of working life ahead of them, earning years ahead of them. So they can quote unquote afford to be a little more aggressive than someone who's say 55, who may only have another 7, possibly 10 working years remaining, or earning years, as we say, remaining. So they're not going to be as aggressive, right? So it's either that, or if the person is older, like if they're 60 or 55, and they've got a lot of cash flow, they're really, really liquid, and they're really savvy investors, then they'll take risk that someone else who may be their same age but doesn't have quite the cash flow would be willing to take. Okay, so that's aggressive mode of investing. A moderate mode of investing is moderate investors accept some risk, not as much as aggressive, not as little as conservative, but they're right in the middle. Some risk to their principal meaning the amount of money you start off with. But they adopt a balanced approach with intermediate term time horizons of 5 to 10 years. So here's what that means. They are going to invest in something, and they're going to have maybe, again, go with the pie chart. They're probably 60% moderate, 20% conservative, and 20% aggressive. Okay, but they're only looking at investing over the next 5 to 10 years, and then they're going to pull out or liquidate or sell whatever they've invested in, right? So when we say time horizons, that literally just means how long a person will stand to stay in a particular investment before they get out of that investment. So here's a tip. Everyone should own a balance of high and low risk. So I don't care if you're conservative, if you're moderate, or if you're aggressive. Whichever mode you're in, you ought to have some things that are high risk, maybe not as much, and then you need to have some things that are low risk. So each one of these modes of investors, aggressive, moderate, or conservative, they're going to have a representation of each mode within their total pie or total portfolio of investments. Moving to conservative, you've pretty much guessed it at this point. Conservative investors are willing to accept little to no volatility. Volatility means chances that things could go wrong, right? So they're going to accept little to no risk in their investment portfolios. Now, this is where you typically tend to see people who have worked, at the same company or several companies for many years. They tend to have a lot sitting in their 401ks or their pension plans, and they're nearing retirement. So they really want to just kind of play it cool, take it easy, not be as risky as they may have been when they were in their 20s. That's typically the conservative investor. Or it could be someone who's young and they just don't have the appetite for the risk of, or a high risk of, losing money. And so, and there are investors who are young who are conservative. It's not always advisable that they be conservative, but again, within all of these ranges and metrics and how we figure out if a person is moderate, aggressive, or conservative, at the end of the day, every investor is going to have to incur some level of risk if they're wanting to see worthwhile returns. Otherwise, you could just put your money in something like a certificate of deposit at a bank, and that's like no risk because it's principal guaranteed, but you're probably going to only earn less than 1%, depending on how long you leave it in there, maybe 2%, maybe 2.25%, if things get really good, but you got to leave it in there for 5 years, or you got to leave it in there for 10 years, and it's money you can't touch. And that's okay. There's a strategy for a product like that as well. But when we say conservative, we're really talking about people who just want to play it cool. So, the tip in this case is, protection is good, but growth is the point, right? So I often tell people, return of your money is in many cases just as critical as return on your money. But remember, the overarching point to investing is so we can grow. You want to put $1,000 in, and get 1,500 back at the end of whatever the time frame is. My point is, you want to give your money a job, so it's got to incur some level of risk. So here's an example of risk tolerance. I just created this example just to kind of give us a little perspective, right? So let's say the lady's name is Rosalind and she's 35 years old. Her income is $70,000 annual. That comes out to $2,916 before taxes per month on a bi-weekly basis. Okay, so her monthly expenses, let's say they're $2,900 monthly expenses. We're talking mortgage or rent, auto insurance, her car payment, student loans, yada, yada, yada. Okay. But her outstanding debts total $17,000, not including a mortgage. So let's say she's got, significant credit card debt and significant student loans, and maybe she's a co-signer for somebody on a car in addition to her own car. But either way, however that is compromised, however that, totals out, whatever those items are, let's say she has an outstanding debt of $17,000, which is quite a lot of debt actually. But she has pretty good cash flow. So here's a perspective. If Rosalind decides to work to age 60, okay, so she has another 25 years of income generating time frame, right? And she's still young, and in the earning phase of her life. However, you may say to yourself, well, she's 35. She has quite a bit of time to work. Chances are, if she does her job pretty well, she's probably going to get a promotion. So that annual income is going to go up. As long as she keeps her monthly expenses where it is, typically when people get promotions and their income goes up, so do their debts. But let's just go with this example for this purpose. So if she gets, if she doesn't get a raise, let's say she doesn't get a raise ever, and she just locks in at 70 grand. Okay, we're not going to calculate inflation and all those other factors. But let's say she locks in at 70 grand. That's $2,916. So literally one of her paychecks within $16 could pay for her monthly expenses, freeing up another $2,900 on the second half of the month, or on her, if she's getting paid bi-weekly, her second paycheck for the month, she could literally have another $2,900. But let's consider the rule of 72. Now you may be asking, well, Otis, what's the rule of 72? I'll explain it. So the rule of 72 simply states that a person, if you take the number 72 and you divide it by the interest earned on an investment, then that's going to tell you how long it would take for that number to double. So here's an example. If she invested $500 a month over the course of a year, that's $6,000. Let's say she earns 4% interest on that investment, which that's pretty good. If you can get something to pay you 4% return on investment, we would take the number 72 divided by 4%. That tells us it would take 18 years for the 6,000 to become 12,000. Okay, so you can just estimate how long it would take for your initial investment to double. So in Rosalind's case, it's going to take 18 years for the 6,000 to become 12,000. Now, if she starts by age 35, right, and she works for another, 25, 26 years, she could reasonably expect by age 53, 54 to have another $12,000. This is why, and this is a good place to bring up the point, the earlier you start, the better. This is why time is so important. Starting early, being consistent is so important when it comes to investing. So just simply put, to make this, succinct, The rule of 72 is a simplified way to determine how long an investment will take to double, given a fixed annual rate of interest. So if you divide 72 by the annual rate of return, that'll tell you a rough estimate of how long it would take for your initial investment to double. Okay. So let's move on to investment suitability. So these are the elements for determining your investment suitability. When we say suitability, we mean something that is right for you given these set of factors in your life, such as age, what other investments you have. Let me give a quick example there. You know, if you have a job and you receive a 401k and you have, depending on where you are in that period of life, if you're 40 or if you're 50 or if you're 60 or whatever the age may be, and you have a 401k, but you haven't really been maximizing it, you don't need to jump into individual stocks or something that is high risk because it may not be suitable given the other factors in your life. We have to look at the total picture of a person. So we look at age, their other investments, their financial situation and needs. Are you caring for an elderly parent, who only has a fixed income, but they may need additional monies for medications or for, a medical professional to come to the house and facilitate some type of rehabilitation. There's so many different factors. And many people today, let me just say, are kind of betwixt and between, because a lot of people who are in their 40s and 50s right now are finding themselves supporting adult children or children nearing adult age and taking care of elderly parents. So their incomes are being squeezed by two bookends. They're supporting grown children and they're also taking care of elderly parents. So you look at somebody, 55, and they've got a parent that's 80 and they got a child that's 22, and both of them are depending on them financially. That's a huge drain and a squeeze on that person's income. So when we talk about investment suitability, you can't just launch out into certain things and say, I want to do this, I want to do that, without looking at your total picture. You also want to look at, what's their liquid net worth, assets minus liabilities. How much is their net, what's that number? If we total up everything you own and minus everything you owe, are we going to be in the red, or is that number going to be in the black, or is the number going to be green? Do you owe more than you own, or is what you own and what you owe locked, dead center? Is it, kind of a zeroed out, or do you own more than you owe and you have some headroom? Are you in the green? So those are important things to look at. You want to look at tax status. What is your current tax bracket that you're sitting in? You want to look at your objectives. What might include generating income? Do you have some real estate and stocks? Do you have some, retirement accounts in place? Are you looking to buy a home? Are you looking to repair a home because you've been in it for 25, 30 years? These are the kind of things that we need to look at. What's your time horizon? Where are you in age versus when you plan to stop working? What are your liquidity needs? Do you have a child with special needs? Do you have a parent, looking at those variables? Are you paying off student loans? Are you looking to go back to school and you're going to have to pay for continuing education to try to, improve your market skills, your skills in the marketplace? All these things we need to look at, including your risk tolerance, right? To determine if an investment is truly suitable for you. So, there are three things I want to highlight. One is, when we're talking about suitability and risk tolerance, you want to look at your debt obligations. Who do you owe and how much interest on the monies do you owe them? You want to look at your debt obligations. This is a starting point. So you can literally write down on a sheet of paper, a blank piece of paper, everyone you owe and what interest rates are attached to it. I don't care if we're talking about loans or lines of credit. A loan would be like a mortgage or a student loan, something that when you make the last payment, it's done. And you want to look at your lines of credit, things like credit cards, Discover, Amex, MasterCard, whatever. And those credit balances and how much you owe and what are the interest rates on that. So you want to look at your total debt obligations when we're determining suitability and risk tolerance. You also want to look at your monthly cash flow. What is it going to take for you to maintain, a prudent and a balanced quality of life, right? So we're talking about food, we're talking about utilities, any transportation needs, et cetera, things like that. We're talking about the essentials. What does it take for you to live month to month? And then the third thing we want to look at is your age and your health. If you're young, but you have some significant health challenges, that can determine what kinds of investments you get in or how your overall pie, imagine that pie chart again. If you're, a balance between moderate or aggressive, are you mostly aggressive but conservative, mostly conservative, slightly moderate? All those little configurations we need to figure out, and age and health is going to be a huge factor in that. So again, these are the kinds of things that we want to look at. Now, the third part we talked about was picking your industry. So this is very, very important because a lot of times people decide, that they want to just invest in something that they read in the Wall Street Journal the first time they read the Wall Street Journal. Or maybe they were looking at something on TV and they said, I was watching this show on MSNBC and they were talking about how well Darden restaurants are doing. So I think I want to invest in, Darden restaurants, which is like, I think like Olive Garden and Red Lobster and that conglomerate. Or maybe they want to start investing in, beverage products, or maybe they want to invest in energy. Whatever the industry or industries are, and I would not do more than two as a new investor. I wouldn't do more than two, max three industries, depending on your ability to take in news, keep up with the news. Do you have a really hectic lifestyle, or are you just going to kind of put some money into, some investments and not look at it till 2 months down the road? If you're going to be very passive in this case, which hopefully you're not, because it's going to be very difficult to build gains and generate significant returns if you're passive. You want to be active investing. This is why I say it's good to just pick 1 to 2 at the max 3 industries. And when we say industry, I'm talking, is it food industry? Is it the hospitality industry? Is it the automotive industry? Is it, something in commodities? Is it the energy sector? You want to find a section of or an industry, and you want to own it. So if you decide to go with energy, you all know what's happening with, coal and natural gas and petroleum, and what's going on with Saudi Arabia and their impact on the global oil market. What's going on with gas prices? If you're into that kind of stuff, which personally I am, then that's the kind of mentality you're going to have. So I highly suggest, as a new investor, pick an industry and own it, because there's going to be a lot of information to get familiar with, and you don't want to overwhelm yourself. So 3 things I would suggest: know your goals. What are your income goals? Monthly money. Do you want to get dividends and try to bring in an extra $150 a month, or whatever the case may be? You want to know, what are your income goals? You want to look at your growth goals. These are your long-term plans, right? Not really monthly, but we're really talking, what do you want to accomplish in 3 years? Do you want to bring in, do you want to see the potential for an extra 10 grand, in your total balances? Do you want to see the potential for an extra 20 grand in your total balances? All these things are going to influence many things like industry, the individual stocks or companies themselves that you decide to invest in, your risk tolerance, suitability. Again, it's all interconnected, okay? You also want to look at your life goals. What is your lifestyle like? You may say, you know what? I'm 30 and I'm single and I don't have kids, and I'm willing to eat peanut butter and jelly for the next 2 years and just take all the money I would spend at said restaurant, and I want to just throw it into investing. Or you may say, you know what, I really don't want to do that. My wife and I, or my husband and I, we really enjoy going out every week. It's kind of like our one time to get away, because we're taking care of, his parents or my parents or my mom or his mom, and I got to send my um, child, $150 a month because they're going through something major, or there's some type of health challenge or something of that nature, or they're between jobs and I don't want them out on the street, but I'm just giving them a little something to help them out. And we go out, me and my husband, or me and my wife on Friday night. That's kind of our moment to get away. And that's important because quality life is important. So you want to look at those things. What are your lifestyle goals? Family. Are there any causes that you're really passionate about? Maybe someone in your family is a breast cancer survivor and you want to contribute to a breast cancer initiative, or maybe there's some other kind of initiative that you want to invest in. You have to look at these three things: income goals, growth goals, and your lifestyle goals. Second thing you want to look at, okay? Now brace yourself, because this is going to sound very deep and confusing, but it is not. This is very simple to understand. I'm going to make this as simple as possible. There's something called ETFs, exchange traded funds, and you want to examine the exchange traded funds. Here's, simply put, an ETF or an exchange traded fund is a marketable security. Remember from the webinar, you should have your notes on that, what a security is. It just tracks an index. Okay, it tracks commodities, bonds. It's like a basket of assets. Think of like a mutual fund, like a pool of stocks, right? Or a pool of assets, except an ETF is different from a mutual fund, because a mutual fund, somebody's managing and determining what goes into that basket. They're determining what eggs go into that basket. But an ETF, or an exchange traded fund, there's no money manager. There's just you. And you're determining what industry or what a sector you invest in, and it's just a pool of assets, and you decide, I want to invest in this and invest in that. And the cool thing about ETFs are they'll tell you how that sector is performing against the average. Okay, so let's say we were talking the Dow Jones average. The Dow Jones may have 100 companies in it: Coca-Cola, Apple, Mobil, Shell, and General Motors, right? And as many other companies as we can think of to equal 100. And they take an average, and they'll say the average of all these companies' performance is 2.5% gains, or it's up, a certain amount of percentage, or it's down a certain percentage. Well, the ETF is going to tell you what industry in that entire collection of stocks. So say you got restaurant stocks, technology stocks, and energy stocks, all totaling up whatever the combined average is of all of those stocks. An ETF is going to say the energy sector contributed this much to it, or brought it down by this much. So again, these are the cool things about ETFs, is that it puts you in the driver's seat and it arms you with real-time information. An ETF can help you understand how a particular industry is performing amongst all the stocks and industries that are being traded on a particular index. An index is like a representation, a company that represents a group of companies. Like Dow Jones represents a group of companies. The S&P 500 represents the top 500 companies in all industries, et cetera, et cetera. Third, investigate company leadership. This is so important as you're determining what companies you want to buy. So when we talk about leadership, I'm talking about CEO, all C-level, CEO, COO, and CFO, and in some cases CIO, Chief Information Officer, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Executive Officer, and you want to look at the chairman of the board, okay? And you want to look for credibility. What are these folks' prior positions held and accomplishments at other companies? Is this somebody like, I remember Steve Jobs pulled a guy from Pepsi-Cola, okay? So that's a beverage industry, and made him CEO of Apple, Macintosh computers. So you want to look at these kinds of things, because you have people in industries that are leaving industries that they started their careers in and totally leaping over to completely different industries and heading up corporations. So you want to look at credibility. What are their prior positions held? What are their accomplishments, in their old positions and in their current positions? You want to look at character. Are there any previous discrepancies, legal or otherwise? You look at the CEO of, Lehman Brothers, who was, sniffing coke in the office. You want to look at these things. What's their character like? Does this person have any discrepancies? Did they have some legal issues at a previous company? I mean, we look at right now Wells Fargo, and John Stumpf, the CEO, is under major scrutiny. But you look at a lot of other financial companies over the last couple of years, and we saw these people in the news. They were being brought up before, senators and boards, and being interrogated like criminals, and then turn around and go right back after being, relatively within reason found guilty. They would turn and go right back to leading these companies again. So you want to look at credibility, you want to look at character, then you want to look at capacity. Are they a visionary? Have they led any expansions, any types of M&A or mergers and acquisitions? You want to look at these kinds of things. Look at, say, Tim Cook, the current CEO of Apple, and his acquisition when he decided to buy Beats headphones. He could have easily said, to the whole, software developers and the team that would lead the charge on new products, and say, you know what? Let's create our own Apple headphones, and let's just jump into the headphone industry. No, he didn't do that. He said, you know what? Who's already successful, is a leader in that industry, has great branding and marketing, has, a healthy number of market share, and let's just acquire them and see if it's worth it. And that's what he did. So you want to pick people who are visionaries, who you've seen make expansions and lead change, and were, not afraid of taking risk, but not also loose cannons who just took any kind of risk on a whim, because we've seen that happen as well and not work out for companies. So you want to investigate company leadership. So, the bottom line is, invest in yourself. You can afford it. Trust me.